Good evening, I'm Ces Orenia Drilon.
I'm Pauline Verzosa.
And I'm Sean Yao.
The big stories tonight. Cabinet members will no longer attend the Senate hearing chaired by Senator Amy Marcos on the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte. A surprising development since just last Sunday, a palace official said the president will not stop his officials from attending the second hearing scheduled this coming Thursday.
And as rescue efforts continue in Myanmar for victims of the 7.7 magnitude earthquake last Friday, let's turn our focus here at home and see just how ready Metro Manila is for the big one. Which cities or districts have the most vulnerable structures?
And just how high are tensions between China and Taiwan? With AFP Chief Romeo Browner advising the Northern Luzon Command to prepare for future eventualities, which may include an emergency in Taiwan. We'll be discussing this development with geopolitical analyst Don McLean-Kill later on.
Nakakalungkot naman kasi alam niyo maraming tanong pa rin, bitin pa rin kasi preliminary report lang naman ang kinaya ko. Umaasa pa rin ako dun sa sinabi ni Presidente na hindi daw pagbabawal. Pero ang liwaliwanag ng sulat, bawal. Hindi sila a-attend.
We begin tonight with former President Rodrigo Duterte's lead legal counsel, Nicholas Kaufman. He had quite a long visit with his client as they prepare for the case before the International Criminal Court. Kaufman also revealed that while Duterte's interim release is being considered, it is not a priority for now.
Okay, let's get the details of this story from Mon Gualvez. He is joining us live from the Netherlands. Hi, Mon. What's the latest update from over there?
Hi, ladies. Good morning from The Hague, Netherlands. Former President Rodrigo Duterte's camp aims to get his International Criminal Court case cancelled before the confirmation of charges in September. But prior to this, the prosecution said they are already prepared to counter the former president.
Can we ask a few questions?
Former President Rodrigo Duterte's lead counsel, Nicholas Kaufman, visited the International Criminal Court Detention Center for at least an hour yesterday. He says his client is in high spirits and is very thankful for the hordes of people who gathered especially on his 80th birthday. But Kaufman admits Digong is still adjusting to life in prison.
He's an 80-year-old man and he has all the conditions and medical issues that accompany a man who's 80 years old. So adjusting to any new form of life is always difficult, especially if it's prison life.
Right now, Kaufman said they are in the final steps of forming Digong's legal team. The camp of former President Rodrigo Duterte admits no one can abridge those who would want to speak out against his cases at the ICC. But they say Digong himself requests the public to still respect the judicial process. Now the Duterte camp is busy preparing the arguments they will submit to the court.
I believe that there is a strong argument for the lack of ability to exercise jurisdiction given the Philippines' withdrawal from the Rome Statute. I hope that the judges will accept my submission. They might decide, obviously, that they don't want to hear it at the earlier stages. They might want to combine it with the confirmation hearing itself. I hope that will not happen, but once again, it's not my position now to presume anything.
Meanwhile, while they're also considering interim release for Duterte, Kaufman says it's not a priority for now.
Interim release is a right, and it can only be tempered by three factors. The first of which is the risk of flight, the second of which is the risk of interference with witnesses or with the evidence, and the third of which is the risk of continuing crimes. None of those factors exist in the present situation, so there is a right for Mr. Duterte to be released.
But while the Duterte camp is yet to decide on a petition for interim release, prosecution says they have already prepared to block it.
Nakita naman ng pretrial chamber na kahit wala na sa kapangyarihan, si Mr. Duterte ay maimpluwensya pa rin po siya. Mayroon pa rin pong kapangyarihan ng kanyang pamilya.
They also fear for victims and witnesses' lives if Digong goes back to the Philippines.
Lalong-lalo na po ngayon na mukhang nagiging mainit po ang online ecosphere, pati po ang physical ecosphere po Oo, kaya kailangan po ng iba yung security para po sa mga victims ng war on drugs. At siyempre, hindi natin alam kung anong magiging resulta nito, no, sa mga ah, yung mga talagang Davao Death Squad members at yung mga vigilante style members.
Prosecution also countered arguments ICC has no jurisdiction on the crimes of former President Duterte. They also insist Duterte's case, crimes against humanity, can actually be treated as an international crime. That's why the trial has to be done at The Hague.
Inopen po yan sometime ng February 2018. Nung partido pa po ang Pilipinas sa Rome Statute. Kaya hindi po isang hadlang po ang pag-alis ng Pilipinas dahil na-open po yung preliminary examination. Kung tingnan nga yung application for arrest warrant, napapaloob nga dun sa November 1, 2011 hanggang March 16, 2019.
The Duterte camp, meanwhile, says it's ready to answer all these in court.
Former President Rodrigo Duterte's common law wife, Hanilet Avancenia, already arrived here early in the Scheveningen prison in The Hague, while notably her daughter, Veronica Kitty Duterte, isn't with her. Avancenia almost visited the place for an hour, and then after which she gave a message of gratitude to the Duterte supporters around. Plus, she asked for prayers for his partner that he will be urgently freed and returned back to the Philippines. Back to you, ladies.
All right. May we know how long the consultation was with the legal counsel and Mr. Duterte? Mga ilang oras ba yun?
Every day, laging 1 hour lamang yung allowed sa mga visitors dito sa detention center. It may be for the lawyers or for the family members. At saka kung mapapansin natin, ngayon lang ulit nagkaroon ng visitor from the family members of the former president. It's because, sabi din ng kamugado, hindi kasi napapayagan agad-agad ng court itong pagpapapasok ng mga bisita. Although they have the whole list of the allowed na mga family members and lawyers, pero yun nga, mas pinaprioritize nila sometimes or most of the time are the lawyers, no, para mas mabigyan ng tsansa in terms of consultation sa mga legal processes na gagawin nila.
Okay.
Ses.
And do we know if the former president has seen the pieces of evidence turned over by the prosecution to the defense?
Not yet, wala pa. Hindi pa nila binabanggit sa atin no, kung meron na ba ito, at saka even the prosecution didn't confirm yet kung meron na ba silang naipasa. They still have more days until April 4. Kailangan sila makapag-submit no, ng mga at least yung pinaka-statement, ay yung pinaka-laman ng kanila information rather. And then after which, kailangan magbigay naman ng observation yung defense dito that they will be given until April 11 to submit dito sa ICC para nga magpatuloy na itong pre-trial chamber before the confirmation of charges in September.
At saka, Mon, hindi pa nila pinapangalanan no, yung mga ibang miyembro ng legal team?
Hindi pa. Actually, when we asked kung kompleto na ba yung legal team, Attorney Kaufman refused to answer it and he just said that we are in final touches. When we ask if that final touches means na ito ba ay we are still waiting for one more or two more or sino kaya ito, he did not mention anything about it. No, so medyo blanco pa tayo in terms kung kumpleto na nga ba, pero yung final touches hindi niya kinlarify if this is somehow about the numbers and kung saan galing at kung sino-sino yung mga lawyers. Maybe we will find out siguro kapag nag-start na yung confirmation of charges by September.
Mon, makikichika lang, no? Mukhang tahimik where you're standing right now. Nandiyan pa ba yung mga supporters? Nakabalik na ba sila dahil weekday na ulit? And do you still see the Vice President, no, Sara Duterte, nakikita-kita pa ba siya around the premises there? Or busy siya sa ibang bagay ngayon?
First, with regard to the supporters, meron pa rin. No, bagamat this is few compared to the weekends at the same time yung last week na talagang maraming tao, especially during the birthday of the former president. Ngayon mas kakaunti pero you can't believe na talaga may mga dumadayo dito galing pa sa Dubai, merong galing Canada, na talagang naglaan ng oras para makabisita dito kahit sa labas lang daw nitong detention center. So may mangilan-ngilan pero hindi na ganoon karami. Pero patuloy na may mga dumarating na mga overseas Filipinos who would want to take a look dito sa detention center. Plus, gusto na nila makita sana si Vice President Sara Duterte and other members of the family. Pero si VP Sara, the last time na nakita natin siya dito sa paligid, especially dito sa may prison or sa detention center, was last Friday pa. No, nung birthday pa ni Digong or ni former President Duterte. And we have no information right now kung nasaan siya, probably because of the security at the same time. Pero meron tayong information na yung araw kasi na to, dapat ito ay para kay VP Sara. Pero binigay niya for Hanilet and Kitty yung slot.
So the family
Sean.
visits, Mon, are they one by one? So bawal magsabay, for example, Kitty and Hanilet or Kitty and Sarah, pa-isa-isa lang ba yung pwedeng papumasok?
Dala-dalawa.
Dala-dalawa.
Dala-dalawa ang pwede. Oo. So, kanina, actually, hindi na nagsabay si Hanilet and yung lawyer, no? So, parang may kasabay na lawyer na isa si Hanilet and then another lawyer naman yung kasama ni Kaufman, Attorney Kaufman. So, dala-dalawa lang. Bawal yung marami at the same time. Ngayon nga, medyo marami-rami na rin yun. Kung tutuusin, no? Parang 4 yung nakapasok technically ngayong araw na to. Dito kay President Duterte. Although, i-confirm natin kung talaga bang nakapasok yung isang abogado na binabanggit ko at yung isang abogado or baka naman si Hanilet lamang at saka si Attorney Kaufman kasi nga dala-dalawa lang talaga ang allowed. Yung kasi nakita natin kanina, pumasok sila sabay, so we just have no information or confirmation rather kung nakapasok ba directly sa loob ng detention center or kung saan namamalagi ngayon si former president. Pero one thing's for sure, only 2 per day are allowed.
And Mon, balikan ko lang si Attorney Kaufman. Ang confirmation of charges won't happen until September. That's 5 months from now. So you have Attorney Kaufman busy contesting 2 things, no? The legality of the arrest and the jurisdiction of the ICC. But sabi niya, confident siya na madidismiss ang charges. Ano ba yung sinasite nila na pwedeng maging president na case? I mean, where is this confidence coming from and how compelling is that argument? May nasabi na ba dyan yung mga lawyers naman ng mga biktima?
Ayun nga, no, Pauline, ang sinasabi ni Attorney Kaufman, they are confident that this argument is very compelling, itong jurisdictional argument dahil they believe that hindi na nga daw, kumbaga yung, how do you call that?
Hindi na
Yung
pasok.
pinaka...
Oo.
hindi kasi nga we withdrawn, no? The Philippines withdrawn from the Rome Statute kaya hindi na daw ito sakop, no, ng jurisdiction para nga i-assert yung pag-aresto kay former President Duterte. So doon sa aspect na yon, yung technicality na yon ang gustong ibato or ilaban ni Attorney Kaufman dito sa International Criminal Court, which he said nagagamit daw talaga in the past. No, this is a valid na klase ng argument na ginagamit nila dyan sa ICC as an example. So ito yung isa sa kanyang babanggitin, bagamat hindi na siya nagbigay pa ng other specifics about it, no? Kasi nga, when we ask yung pinaka-sinasabi naman ng other camp, the prosecution, especially yung sinasabi nila na nangyari nga yung crimes during the time that the Philippines is still part of ICC. Attorney Kaufman refused to answer that because yun na nga daw yung gusto niyang i-discuss during the court hearing, no? So ayaw na niya mag-divulge ng mga strategies, legal strategies, dahil di naman doon niya obligasyon i-explain daw yan sa public, no? He will just do it daw sa court proceeding. Pauline.
And Mon, in Qatar, no, there were Filipinos arrested for staging a demonstration. May balita na ba kung tutulungan ba daw ng Duterte camp ang mga Pilipino na naaresto doon?
There's no specific word from the Duterte camp if they will help these Duterte supporters who na-aresto, who are arrested dyan sa Qatar. Pero as we can remember, last week or last weekend, nabanggit ni former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque that he is appealing to the Qatari authorities for consideration dahil nga nagpakita lang naman daw ng pagsuporta itong mga supporters na ito kay former president at sana maunawaan naman daw nila at mapalaya na rin kaagad yung mga naaresto.
Pero
Pauline.
just to close the loop on this, Mon, no, ang sinabi rin naman ni Attorney Kaufman very clearly, at the end of the day, lahat ito ay nakasalalay sa mga judges ng ICC na sila talaga yung makakapag-decide ng lahat. Correct?
Yes, kaya nga ayaw din niya mag-presume kasi when we ask kung ano yung timeline, no, kung kailan ang tanong natin talaga, kailan sila mag-file ng motion for interim release ni Pangulong Duterte. He did not mention. Ayaw niya magbigay ng specific on that. And then pangalawa, yung timeline na naman para malaman natin kung mapagbibigyan ba, kung sakasakali, yung pagpalaya nga kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte, hindi rin daw niya masasagot yan ngayon. Kasi nga, only the judges can give a decision to that. Pero ang sinasabi niya, there's always a possibility. Pwedeng mag-grant yung kanyang motion in terms of the jurisdictional argument or pwede rin daw ito i-combine doon sa confirmation of charges in September. Medyo matagal-tagal pa yan. Kasi nga, ang tinatanong natin, ba't tayo paulit-ulit na nagtatanong sa kanya ng timeline dahil nga in the previous cases that he handled, no? So, sinasabi niya, this is highly kind of case kapag dumadaan daw sa ICC at different daw palagi ang iba't ibang kasong dinidiscuss or kumbaga dinidinig rather dito sa International Criminal Court. Sean.
Okay, maraming salamat sa iyo, Mon Gualvez. Still reporting to us live from The Hague in the Netherlands. Thank you, Mon.
And back here at home, members of President Bongbong Marcos's cabinet will no longer attend Senate hearings on former President Rodrigo Duterte's arrest. Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin informed the Senate through a letter saying they, quote, must decline the invitation but remain open to cooperating through other legal channels. He said cabinet officials had already provided information during the March 20 hearing, noting that matters not covered by executive privilege had been discussed. Bersamin also noted 4 Supreme Court petitions on Duterte's arrest and warned that further discussions could violate the sub judice rule. The letter was released by the office of Senator Amy Marcos, who has distanced herself from her brother, President Marcos, over Duterte's arrest and turnover to the International Criminal Court. Senator Amy called the Senate hearing last March as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, saying many questions remain unanswered. She expressed surprise over the cabinet's decision, calling it inconsistent with the president's previous statements. She urges reconsideration, warning that it may raise public suspicion. Despite this, she said the hearing will push through.
Nakakalungkot naman kasi alam niyo maraming tanong pa rin, bitin pa rin kasi preliminary report lang naman ang kinaya ko. Marami rin bagong impormasyon na sana maging pagkakataon para yung mga magulong sagot, yung hindi magkatugma-tugma ng mga datos at saka yung mga katanungan ng taong bayan, sana pagkakataon yun para maisagot. Kaya nagulat naman ako. Kaya sabi ko sa kanila, may sulat ako sa kanila, baka naman ma-reconsider nila kasi sayang naman ang pagkakataon, maririnig ng tao kung ano talaga nangyari, kung nagkamali ako, tatanggapin ko naman at mas maganda yung nagkakaliwanagan kasi pag hindi sumisipot, ang duda ng tao may tinatago. Paasa pa rin ako doon sa sinabi ni Presidente na hindi daw pagbabawal, pero liwaliwanag ng sulat, bawal. Hindi sila a-attend.
We're going to take a quick break, but coming up next, just how ready or not is the National Capital Region in case the Marikina fault system moves? Which cities or districts are most vulnerable? We'll sit down with the Office of Civil Defense next. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News. The first batch of the Philippine Interagency Humanitarian Contingent has arrived in Myanmar. They are set to assist in the search and rescue operations for missing residents, including 4 Filipinos. News 5's Brian Basa has the details.
Friday's magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar was also felt in Yunnan, China. Footage showed doctors remaining calm while performing surgery, as where the strong tremor shook their hospital. 2 additional doctors arrived to hold the patient, preventing them from falling. At another hospital's baby ward, cribs were seen rolling. One nurse held onto the crib while another knelt down, hugging an infant in her arms. Once the tremor stopped, they immediately evacuated the babies. No one was injured in both incidents. But in Thailand, where several infrastructures collapsed, 20 people have died as of the latest report. 74 are still missing. Myanmar has suffered the most as the epicenter of the earthquake was recorded near its second largest city, Mandalay. As of today, the death toll has exceeded 2,000. 50 of them were preschool children from the school that collapsed in Mandalay. 3 days have passed since the earthquake, and rescue operations continue. Among those rescued was a senior citizen who was trapped in their home. A grandmother and her grandchild were also saved after being trapped for 15 hours in their condo unit. The exact number of missing persons is still unclear, but among them are 4 Filipinos that are unaccounted for. Relief efforts from Asia, America, and Russia continue to arrive in Myanmar. And just today, the first batch of the Philippine Interagency Humanitarian Contingent landed in the country. The 90-man team is composed of special rescue units from the Philippine Air Force and the Philippine Army. There are also rescuers from the MMDA, DENR, and the Office of the Civil Defense.
We will coordinate with the AHA Center and we will identify the specific work assignment will be assigned. And for sure, the Philippine contingent is ready to perform our mandate. And we consider also top priority is the safety. So one of the consideration is how to go about the security concerns.
Apart from the rescue team, the Department of Health will also deploy a 32-man team to help with Myanmar's medical needs. For News 5, I'm Brian Basa, and we are One News.
Meanwhile, our very own National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council has said the Philippines is not yet ready for a magnitude 7.7 earthquake like the one that shook Myanmar. Let's discuss this and more with Attorney Chris Bendijo, spokesperson of the Office of Civil Defense. First of all, sir, magandang gabi, and any update on your end on our humanitarian mission there in Myanmar?
Ladies, good evening. As for updates, we just received initial feedback that they are already able to coordinate with the AHA Center. They already landed in Myanmar. We're waiting for information as to which locations they will be assigned to because we really have to follow the operational guidelines from Myanmar. There are several other countries who sent their contingents and we're waiting for that information at present.
Any word on the 4 missing Filipinos?
Unfortunately, we don't have information at this point. We cannot also control which location we will be assigned to. This is basically part of the One ASEAN, One Response agreement that when any ASEAN country would experience such a disaster, the other neighboring countries would be sending their contingent teams. But in terms of operational control, it is retained by the state that calls for that assistance.
Attorney Bendijo, now let's go back here at home. Well, there's much anxiety about the pronouncement that we're not yet quite prepared for a magnitude 7.7 quake. What are the factors that indicate we're not prepared yet?
Actually, Ma'am says we'd like to thank you for this opportunity as well. No, we have to clarify that answer. When we are asked about preparedness, we have to consider aspects of preparedness. Now, when we say response readiness, we can arguably say that we are prepared for that. We've conducted our nationwide simultaneous earthquake drills. Our interagency coordination has been stronger than ever. We've invested in technology, the ones that we've sent also in Myanmar, life detecting systems, our chlorinators, our devices, our lifting bags. So in terms of preparedness, as to that aspect of response readiness, we have achieved already a certain level of preparedness.
Okay.
But when we talk about pre-disaster preparedness, this is something that the USEC of CDA, si Ariel Nepomuceno, has emphasized in the past few days, no? For the very basic things, for example, your compliance with your building code. Have you really complied with the standards of the building code? Because all of these should go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you, for example, do your duct cover and hold in a structure that does not comply with the standards of the building code, it makes no sense, because if that structure collapses, then you go with that collapsed structure. So what we're emphasizing is that there are many activities that we have to comply with, we have to consider, so that we can be really more prepared, no, for these types of disaster.
Actually, it's good because this is a warning, so that we can do what we can before a disaster occurs. So who is in charge of doing the inventory on the structural integrity of buildings and homes?
In terms of certifying the compliance with the building code, this is an obligation of the local building official, and that is within the responsibility of the local government units. That's why we're happy. A few days ago, USEC Claire Castro also made a pronouncement reminding our LGUs to strictly implement the observance of the building code when they issue the construction and the occupancy permits.
Yes, pero attorney,
Busy silang nangangampanya.
yun, one, that. Two, parang the trust. I don't know if we all come from different LGUs. So, if you ask us, meron ba kaming ganitong tiwala sa LGU namin? Meron din bang national agency who's tasked to oversee these LGUs, whether or not they're really...
Tiga-kumpas.
Kumbaga.
Well, I fully understand that concern, no? And I think aside from this incident in Myanmar, there was a study conducted by FIVOLX and JICA way back in 2004, simulating as if a 7.2 magnitude would hit Metro Manila. And there, in that study, you will see that approximately more than 1 million structures would be critically damaged. In terms of casualties, more than 30 to 50,000 individuals would be automatically dead, more than 100,000 injured. But we have to highlight that this study was conducted way back in 2004. So 20 years have passed. So perhaps these numbers would have increased now. But what we're saying is that at this point in time, we still have this opportunity to catch up. If you go to Japan, their hospitals have all been retrofitted, 100% retrofitted. Their school systems, 80% have been retrofitted. So what we're saying is that we generate awareness. We can still do what we can do. We try to retrofit. There are private entities that are open for these types of technologies, and we're still hoping that we can still catch up in preparation for this big one.
Okay, attorney, I'm going to mention that video that went viral, that under construction building in Bangkok that collapsed. It's actually a government building, and they found early, I think, evidence to show that they use substandard steel rebars for that. So understandably, this has, led us to question also about the integrity of our public structures. Like you mentioned, 50 kids died in one school in Myanmar, and we know in early 2023 there was a Senate hearing, and it was mentioned almost 6,000 public buildings are due to undergo some retrofittings. Does that number still hold true?
We just saw a retrofitted bridge collapse. That's right. Wala pang earthquake yan.
Again, we echo the same sentiments. We raise the same concerns, because definitely all our preparedness insofar as response, insofar as our activities are concerned after the disaster or during the disaster, should really be complemented by these structures. That's why we have been really, creating this awareness for this importance of monitoring, inspecting our structures. And again, perhaps we can explore some other, like for example, JICA, to conduct another study relative to this. We understand that there's a substantial cost to this if we will be retrofitting all structures. So what we're suggesting is perhaps identify, for example, your schools and your hospitals, which are vital institutions. Perhaps you can prioritize this when we talk about retrofitting.
And attorney, a lot of the focus is actually in Metro Manila because of the West Valley fault. But there are other 6 active trenches around the country. Just how ready are other regions such as Abra, Bicol, and Davao, or Bohol rather?
Again, we don't want to create too much fear, no? But just to answer that point, there are more than 30 active faults in the Philippines. We have monitored several, or I think 6 trenches now, which we are really closely monitoring. The big one, we are referring to the West Valley Fault, but that is just projected to generate a 7.2 magnitude earthquake. If you go to your Manila Trench, we're really concerned about that also because the projected earthquake there is 8.2. As to readiness, like what I've said, the government is ready. Our teams, our response teams are ready. Our coordination from the national to the local to the barangay level, we have disaster risk reduction management offices in all these 3 levels. So the response aspect is there. It's pretty solid. But when we talk about, again, the magnitude of casualties brought about by our basic activities like failure to comply with the building code, this is something that we really have to emphasize at this point in time because this should go really hand in hand with our preparedness insofar as response is concerned.
And when it comes
Just if I may just add,
Okay.
we can go even to that detail. The DOST through FIVOLX, they have this app. It's called Hazard Hunter PH. You can visit this app. You can type in your address, and you can generate a report as to the exposure of your address, as to what risks, volcanic, earthquake, flooding. So what we're saying is that we generate all the information that we can gather now so that we can act properly. We can prepare insofar as these hazards are concerned. It would really help to be more aware now before the disaster happens rather than looking for these information when the disaster strikes.
Yeah, that's right. Because when you talk about readiness, it's more of a reactionary effort, right? Rather than being proactive in actually preventing a major loss of life.
That's correct. And in fact, even if you go as basic as your family unit, like in my case, for example, we've already had this conversation in the family. What do we do when we have senior citizens at home? What do we do when the parents are in the office? What do we do when the children are in school? Where do we meet after the earthquake? What will happen if, for example, certain access points in our house would be blocked? We've already removed things that can easily be broken from our cabinets. This awareness is something that we can generate individually with respect to our households. Hopefully, this can contribute to the community, and then hopefully we can also catch up insofar as our infrastructure is concerned.
Very quick last question.
Okay.
There was talk of a command center that was being built in Clark for such disasters like the big one. Would you have any updates, Attorney Bendijo, kung tapos na ba to? Is it in the process, under construction?
The Clark site is only one of the emergency command centers that we have. The primary command center that we have is in Camp Aguinaldo. We've already located 3 other alternative command center sites, one in Nueva Ecija, one in Clark, and then one in Subic. The one in Clark is still to be built. The one in Nueva Ecija is already functional, and the one in Subic is also to be built. The reason for this is that when we create scenarios, so for instance, if your Camp Aguinaldo site is down, at least we would still have another command center that can coordinate action in different localities in the Philippines.
Okay. Thank you so much, Attorney Chris Bendijo of the OCD.
Time to pause for another quick breather, but right after that, we will be taking a look at the current drills that China is conducting around Taiwan as the AFP's Chief of Staff tells its Northern Luzon Command to prepare for future eventualities, including an emergency in Taiwan. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still with us here on The Big Story. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief General Romeo Browner Jr. has instructed the Northern Luzon Command, or NOLCOM, to begin planning for a potential invasion of Taiwan. In his speech at the NOLCOM's 38th anniversary, Browner said the command is expected to lead an operation for the rescue of 250,000 overseas Filipino workers based in Taiwan. He also said that NOLCOM should prepare to expand its operations, saying, quote, "If something happens to Taiwan, we will be involved inevitably."
NOLCOM is our frontliner here in the Northern Hemisphere. And as we saw a while ago, in their shift to territorial defense, they have gone a long way already. But let me give you this challenge, this further challenge. Do not be content with securing just the Northern Hemisphere up to Mavulis Island. Start planning for actions in case there is an invasion of Taiwan. Okay? So extend na natin yung sphere of operations natin. If something happens to Taiwan, inevitably we will be involved. There are 250,000 OFWs working in Taiwan, and we will have to rescue them. And it will be the task of Northern Luzon Command to be at the front line of that operation. These are the areas where we perceive the possibility of an attack. No? I do not want to sound alarmist, but we have to prepare.
And as Taiwan-China tensions escalate and an invasion looms, we welcome geopolitical analyst Don McLean-Gill to discuss its potential impact in the Philippines. Good evening and welcome to The Big Story. First of all, what do you see as the message China is trying to send Taiwan with these massive military exercises?
Good evening, and thank you very much for having me. It's a great pleasure to come back and to discuss this. Now, looking beyond China, as we can clearly see that China's expansionist ambitions would not stop at Taiwan, but basically it is trying to set a narrowly driven exclusionary policy throughout the greater Western Hemisphere, or rather the Western Pacific, in relation to its great power ambitions. But let's go back to what General Bronner said, and this is very important. A statement coming from the chief of the AFP at a time when the PLAN is seen to be creeping closer to the main island of Taiwan and, of course, its smaller outlying islands through military drills such as the one that is currently undergoing. Now, the level of vigilance and responsiveness of our military in that regard is commendable, to prepare based on the evolving realities, not just of the greater Western Pacific, but also the first island chain.
Yes, but what preparations can we do? The Philippines is not exactly spending much for its defense. Well, perhaps let's look at Batanes to begin with. What can the military do in terms of preparing for such an eventuality?
Right. So by virtue of geography, our treaty alliance with the United States, and of course the presence of over 200,000 OFWs in Taiwan, whatever takes place there would have direct ramifications for our security interests. So what we are currently seeing is that we are more attentive. Our armed forces, our Coast Guard are more attentive to the developments that are unfolding to our north of the Luzon Strait as well. The Philippines, along with our ally and partners, are aware of this very interdependent security challenge, one connecting our northern regions to the West Philippine Sea. So in that regard, we have seen a number of important developments in the past 2 years alone, from expanding EDCA sites to the north, and of course the creation of the PCG station last year in Batanes. We are also looking at special operations, advanced special operations between the Philippines and the United States in Batanes as well, as mentioned in the joint statement between Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Teodoro. And of course, you also look at the 2025 Balikatan exercises. which also focuses on enhancing preparedness and interoperability cooperation between the Philippines and the United States using new and high-end weapon systems such as the Nemesis, which is crucial for coastal defense because of its accuracy in targeting moving maritime assets. The Philippine Navy will also be using 3 major weapon systems in order for test firing as well. So in that regard, these are steps that are used in order to enhance preparedness. We're also working with our other like-minded partners like Japan, who is also positioned critically in the first island chain. So in that regard, what the Philippines is doing right now is crucial. What the military is doing is crucial. What the Coast Guard is doing is crucial and would require more continuity and consistent political will. Because clearly, when we look into China's behavioral pattern, it would not stop from Taiwan, right? It would not stop just by overtaking Taiwan. It would continue as it pushes forward. So in that regard, we are at the bridge. We are at the crux of this overarching expansionist ambitions of China. So in that regard, we have to be clear on how we would intend to set up our position in this regard.
Speaking of clarity, Don, I wanted to pick your brain about this because we know about this blockade, and that's the best way for China to try to block off Taiwan. We know they have roughly a schedule before 2027, so we are able to prepare. But today, the commander of the Eastern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army, he actually kind of admitted that this is a blockade rehearsal, and it's kind of jarring for me hearing that he's so blasé about admitting it. Do you notice that this is an escalation in the messaging, or are we reading too much into it?
No, absolutely. And I think that the statement by General Bronner is in fact very proactive. We can see that China has been quite nonchalant about its ambitions to invade Taiwan. And in fact, the military drills that have been taking place by the PLAN since 2023 have actually been creeping closer and closer to the mainland of Taiwan, to the point that they actually seem like they are practicing or rehearsing for potential invasion plan. So in that regard, of course, we can clearly see that China has the intent, and it has been quite determined in pursuing this objective. And of course, the objective won't stop there, as I have mentioned earlier. No amount of political appeasement will be able to address the adventurous ambitions of China. So therefore, it is important to look at that and not to overstate or not to understate, of course, the threat, but it's also important to look at China's military potential in an objective manner. Also not to exaggerate China's military might. And this is why it is crucial for us, along with our ally, along with our partners, to ensure that we are able to collectively prepare. If you look at South Korea, for instance, China has also begun indulging in unilateral actions at the West Sea, right? And this is, of course, one of the recent developments this year. It has also been trying to emulate what it is doing in the West Philippine Sea when it comes to East Asia or Northeast Asia. So in that regard, we can see how everything, if you try to connect the dots, there are, of course, a number of determinants that show that gray zone in itself also would have its limitations before it eventually turns into kinetic warfare. So in that regard, we have to prepare, and that's what our armed forces are doing.
Well, during his speech, Don, you have General Browner talking about the evolving nature of warfare. As you mentioned, aside from traditional kinetic warfare, he also pointed out cyber information, cognitive and political warfare. Just help us understand what he meant by that and help us give context to it.
Absolutely. So, the disinformation, malign information operations that we have been talking about, this is what you may understand as the tip of China's gray zone sphere, or rather its gray zone sphere. So in this regard, we can see how China is trying to bend the Filipinos' will, and of course also the political will of Malacanang, and of course our political leadership, and at the same time to ensure that it sets the conditions for public unrest through the proliferation of media social media articles or posts with the use of technological developments such as AI to portray, for instance, the Philippines as the country that is provoking the situation, or in another instance, the Philippines as being a puppet or proxy of someone else, in that regard, to show that what the Philippines is doing is not, in fact, based on the interests of how the Philippines should pursue its engagements in the region. So these are the sort of provocations that China has been doing for the past few years. And in fact, it has been increasing and will continue to increase as the midterm elections would come in. So this is the usual train of thought. This is the usual narrative that China tries to position itself in within the public consciousness. And of course, with these statements coming from our leadership, we're bound to expect some disinformation trends of PRC propagandists stating that the Philippines wants to provoke the situation, etc., etc. This is based on the national interests of the Philippines, and what it is doing right now is clearly based on its national objectives as well. It's that level of agency that we need to appreciate.
Should we have the DFA becoming more, vocal, as our chief of staff in his speech today? They barely hold, press briefings the way China does, for instance.
Well, that's true. I mean, the way China has been acting is, of course, in a way that clearly recognizes what its long-term ambitions would be in the region. But as far as our government agencies are concerned, if you look into the National Security Council, the National Maritime Council, National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea, if we look into the Department of Defense, these are various agencies that have been actually quite proactive in that positioning. And of course, when we look at the DFA, they have also been doing an important job in, of course, facilitating the right conditions for bilateral consultation mechanisms, for instance. And this is important in showing that the Philippines is in fact trying to open or continues to open lines of communication, but at the same time, we are also giving them the signal that the Philippines would not stand idle in the face of Chinese coercion. So in that regard, of course, there has to be a little bit of balance based on the mandates of these agencies. But if you look into what is taking place on the ground, we are clearly seeing that the Philippines is recognizing its position as a stakeholder of stability in the region. So in that regard, we have to look into these critical, examples that I mentioned earlier, where the Philippines has actually been proactive enough to set the tone for regional cooperation, not as a proxy, but as a clear element of stability in the region. So this is in fact very important. But something
and lastly,
that
Gil, if I may interrupt you, lastly and briefly, I hope, the economic impact, especially as we have 250,000 OFWs in Taiwan, the economic impact that will be felt by the Philippines by this escalation of hostilities.
Well, clearly, there would be a socio-economic impact. And of course, that is one of the aspects of our multi-aligned cooperation today, where we are trying to ensure that we can revitalize our economic cooperation, diversify supply chain networks, etc. But of course, as we plan on the military and defense front, this is one of the important challenges that we would have to overcome as well. And this would also involve improving our national economic environment to ensure that we are able to maximize whatever we can in the near future as the geo-economic situation continues to complicate in the long term.
We thank you so much for your time. That was geopolitical analyst Don McLean Gill.
Now, in other news, a petition before the Supreme Court urges Congress to pass a law banning political dynasties. The One Sambayan or Isambayan coalition, led by retired Justice Antonio Carpio, filed the petition for certiorari and mandamus, along with other advocates. Last year, lawyers from the University of the Philippines filed a similar petition. The petitioners want the court to order Congress to enact a law within 1 year in line with Article 2, Section 26 of the Constitution. They also requested that Congress be held in contempt if it fails to comply. Respondents in the case include Senate President Francis Escudero and House Speaker Martin Romualdez. The petitioners also argue that Congress has ignored its constitutional duty by failing to pass an anti-dynasty law for nearly 4 years. They further argued political dynasties, quote, concentrate power within a few families, undermine democracy, and worsen poverty.
Really looking forward to what the Supreme Court will say on that one.
I know.
It's really interesting.
Well, you know, it's in a way connected also to opening the floodgates of the party
Yes,
list
agree.
to political dynasties, which was penned by
Former President Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo.
no
No? Who was that?
Justice Carpio.
Oh.
Justice.
It
I mean, the
would be nice to have him
decision.
on the show. The decision
Oh.
allowing other
groups or
marginalized groups.
As long as you are representing somebody, right? You're in, which means any
Which means a political dynasty.
So we'll see, because right when you'd be voting against your own interests, so that's like a true test if
Exactly.
the government is really.
Actually, I was watching StoryCon earlier, so you guys, you can just watch it. It's on YouTube. They were discussing this with Christian Monson about why they chose to challenge, and he was like, "Why not? Nothing's happening. It goes against the spirit of the Constitution, and they just want to see what the Supreme Court's going to say." I'm really curious.
Pauwi's right. How can you vote against your own interest?
We'll see how
Can the
it
Supreme Court do it in themselves?
There's no answer to that. That's why it's so interesting. Again, we have to save that for another day. Not
Interesting.
today. Interesting. And just like that, it's April 1. That's it for the show today.
We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thank you for watching. Good night.